this is my 3060. It's not in the box, but I really like this card. I'm very happy with it. 192-bit memory bus, amazing, love that.
Yeah, so this is Maisie from the future. This was recorded back in July of 2025. It is currently January 2026, so I think it goes without saying that I don't stand by a certain amount of what I said back then, but most of the gameplay footage has been refilmed because of new driver updates and all that.
But this is 2 generations old now. This came out in like 2021, I think, either 2020 or 21. So it's pretty old. And this is in that black PC over there. And today, I got an upgrade. 5070 Ti. This is the most powerful graphics card I've ever owned. Previously, it was technically the Arc, but we'll get into why it's not really later. This has not been opened yet. So we're gonna see how that goes. It's also my first ever card from PNY. I've only ever had flash drives from this company. So we'll see how that goes. I happen to get it at MSRP of $750, which isn't great, but better than nothing. Let me get a razor blade. I can't find a razor blade, so we're gonna try to do it with this this PCIe like little blocker thing. I forget what these are called. That can just go on the sticky part. Oh, it's right over the eye. I wasn't even looking. And beneath that foam, quick install guide, which we don't actually care about. What is this? Oh, I see. This might be a problem.
So at the time, for whatever reason, I didn't consider that the 5070 Ti used a 12-volt high-power connector. I thought it used 2 8-pins or maybe 3 8-pins. I'm not sure what I thought, but yeah, it would become a bit of an issue for a while.
Actually, I lied. No, it's not. It's not a problem. I'm gonna put it in the black PC, which I've been calling the benchmark PC. I do use it for other stuff, but right now it's the benchmark PC. And I don't think that power supply has 3 8-pins. I think it only has 2. Maybe technically 3 if you include the CPU one, but I'm not counting that. Oh my god. It's like 6-7 pounds. Jesus. Voila. After a lot of effort. Oh, that's nice. They put plastic around it. So I did buy this brand new, not used or anything, because for whatever stupid reason, used ones are still more expensive than brand new ones. So it has like all these peels on it. Like the A770 was also new and didn't have any of these peels, I don't think. I really like the PCIe cover that it has. It's not as good as the one from my 3060, but it does the job, so I don't care. Oh, those kind of look really sad. They aren't as golden, they're more like bronze. Ooh, actually, using my camera, I can kind of see into the PCB there. Wow, that's where it ends? It ends right here? That's insane. This whole rest of half the card is all cooling. That's wild. It's also the biggest card I've ever owned, being 3 slots. Okay, let's get this in the computer. I don't have a camera angle for that, unfortunately, so you're just gonna have to take my word for it. Well, I was most of the way putting this in when the hard drive bays here that, to be fair, I'm not using, don't make it fit. Because this is considerably longer than the 3060. So now I have to take the back panel off as well, and then fix that. Yay! Okay. Took out the racks. We got the GPU in. Now, since I put this in, I have to hold it together like this. Whee. Whoa. Why did that kick to life? That is concerning since I have the power supply completely off. But we are not going to worry about that. Yeah, we'll just pretend that didn't happen. Okay, let's get this benchmark. So, something really odd was happening. When I would have this plugged in, but the computer was off, it would give me error code 8 and then nothing, which is some sort of like microcode initializing or whatever, and it shouldn't be doing that. So I was about to go buy like some adapter to do like Molex to PCIe 8-pin, because I was like, I guess this just isn't working for it. Maybe it can't take from 2 different power sources, whatever. Because when I would plug this in, but nothing else, it would do that. Like the power supply for this system would literally be off, and it wouldn't have this light glowing, but it would have the error code glowing. The fan would spin up, that fan would spin up. So it was really confusing. So I was like, okay, maybe I can just run it off of 2 of these wires instead of all 3. Maybe it just won't be able to like max itself out, you know. I'll just have to be careful with it. If it crashes, whatever. DNF, or I'll just re-benchmark everything in the white PC because this has a native 12-volt high-power connector. But when I went to unplug this, right, tried to turn it on and everything, I was like, silly me, power switch was still off. So I turned the power switch on, I was like, wait a minute. I was testing with the power switch off, trying to press the power button. So maybe if it's on and then I plug it in, it'll work? And mind you, I had this like actual power cable unplugged. Plug this in, fan started spinning up on the power supply. So I guess 12-volt high power goes both ways? Because theoretically that shouldn't be possible. That the graphics card was powering the power supply. This was completely unplugged, like there are no switches or anything on it. This is like some weirdo OEM HP desktop power supply. And plugging it into the 12-volt high power adapter turned it on. I was like, you know what? I'm not risking that. Plugging this thing in, and we're in Windows now. So I'll get back to that.
So that's where the footage ends from July. I lost all of the benchmarking footage somehow, but it's fine. I would have to redo the benchmarks anyway on newer graphics drivers and everything. But that still confused me, how the power supply was able to just power through the graphics card. Still don't know why that is, but needless to say, it is not on that jank system anymore. I don't remember when or why I swapped it. I don't know how I even got to Windows doing that. But now it's on its own dedicated power supply with a 12-volt high power connector. It's totally fine. It's significantly better than it was before. But that was the Threadripper system, and all the benchmark results were heavily skewed because the CPU was doing all the work and throttling and just not able to keep up while the graphics card was just big chillin'. It was using usually 20 to 30% just constantly, even at 4K HDR. It was really nice. So now we're going to get into the actual benchmarks that I've done in the future. This is not on the Threadripper system. This is on the quote-unquote gaming PC, the white computer you could see in those clips. I've since realized that that computer was throttling for years from the cheapo, like $20 CPU cooler that I was having. So I upgraded it to an AIO, and then I did all the tests again 2 days ago. I just haven't had time to edit since then. So the first game I tested here was Peak. And I know what you're thinking, kind of a relaxing game, you know, not super demanding. I completely agree. But for reference, on my 3060 and on my Arc system before, I was getting massive stuttering and frame drops, and it was very odd. So I wanted to see, is it the graphics card, is it the CPU? I have not tested any other card in the system since upgrading to the AIO. But this is a fun bug that you're seeing here. I was completely stuck like behind the elevator, kind of back into the left of the elevator. So I restarted the game and then started up a match, and it was fine from there. So from here, starting out, we're at about 250 FPS with dips down to 166. That was the lowest I believe I ever saw it go. I'm sure it was shader compiling, or maybe it was the buffering things into RAM or VRAM. I'm not entirely sure. I don't know how to check those metrics, unfortunately. But as you can see, graphics card at 78% right now, 77. We are drawing 160, 170 watts. It peaked up to 200 there. CPU is completely fine. We're at 44 degrees Celsius, 46% utilization. We're getting over 200 FPS. This is in DirectX 12 with all of the settings completely maxed out. So yeah, I think we're just hitting the limits of the engine rendering here, not so much the graphics card or the CPU. I did see 95% on the graphics card there for a millisecond there. But so far it seems like we are completely chilling. I'm gonna cut ahead a little bit here. So this is quite a big leap. I'm almost at the peak of the first little mountain here. Still at 220 FPS, 218. So we're hovering around that 200 range. If you want to cap it at like 195, then you're perfectly okay to do that. Honestly, it's more than playable. Peak is really a game that you can enjoy at even 60 frames per second, but I was getting 30 on my 3060 system. So yeah, this is a huge leap over that. So our next game here is Overwatch 2. This is at DirectX 11, borderless windowed, 100% render scale, and we have the FPS counter maxed out to 600, which we aren't hitting here, but that's totally fine. We have NVIDIA Reflex completely disabled, and we are on the Epic preset with upsampling as default, so it's not using any DLSS, no FSR, no XESS. And I mean, we're getting 250, 60, right now it's 70. Lowest I saw it go, I believe, was a little over 230. So this is more than acceptable for an esports title, and as you can see, we are not being CPU bottlenecked here. Our bottleneck is entirely the actual engine that Overwatch runs off of and the GPU itself. I saw it get up to 98% utilization for a second there, and it should be noted that the graphics card is also recording all of these through OBS, through NVIDIA NVENC. So there is a little bit of performance drop due to the CPU and GPU using OBS, but even without that, it's still getting approximately the same frame rate. It's really within margin of error, so that is not affecting it at all. And ignoring my awful Overwatch gameplay, this is more than acceptable for an esports title, and if you were playing this seriously competitively, it's likely that you'd be playing on all low settings. You'd probably get close to that 600 range. I did not test this, unfortunately, but it's more than likely that you would. Our next game is Forza Horizon 5, and as you can expect, we maxed out the settings here, no stones unturned. I did try using DLSS, but for whatever reason I was getting an error. Just to see if there was any improvement at all. I don't know what version of DLSS Forza uses, but regardless, it threw up an error in-game, so I don't know what that was about. So this is Mac settings. We have MXAA on here, so there's a little bit of flickering with like the power lines there, some of the trees you can kind of vaguely see, but we're zooming by so fast you can hardly tell. It's more so visible on the car itself, but as you can see, we're getting 160 FPS, 150, and for a racing game, you don't need a high frame rate. But it's really interesting that you can play at this frame rate at max settings. So I don't have words to explain how nice this is. I'm going into settings in this video here. You can see pretty much everything's extremed. We have unlocked on, no motion blur. I turned on, I was doing some testing with the different anti-aliasing, and TAA was by far the best looking out of all of them, and it actually increased performance marginally, but again, within margin of error. And our limit here is not the CPU, it is absolutely the GPU. Look at that, 97% utilization. That's amazing. We want to be using the graphics card as much as possible. That's the point of these tests here. So it's incredible that we get this performance when really in racing games you only need like 60 FPS. You can even go 90 just for a little bit more smoothness, but you don't need the most possible, especially in not super competitive games like Forza. Next up on our list is Doom Eternal, and here we get another issue similar to Peak, where I just got a black screen for whatever reason, and at first I thought, oh, maybe this is like, maybe it's still loading, it's still buffering. I gave it a couple minutes and it was still doing it, so I restarted the game and then it was totally fine. I did end up starting a new game just because I had no idea where I actually was, but this was insane to play. I don't think I've ever seen frames this high before other than like Minecraft, but 300 FPS. The lowest I believe I saw was about 268, 270, really just during moments where it transitions to like a cutscene, rendered in engine still, but typically they're a little bit higher fidelity, or you have the camera locked to a certain position, so you're getting a bit of a dip there. Yet again, we are maxing out the GPU, which is exactly what we want. CPU chilling, 49 degrees Celsius, sorry, 44 degrees Celsius, 51% utilization, 300 FPS. Just incredible, and yes, this is an indoor segment, but in just a second I will cut to the outdoor. So you can see in the outdoor segment, we're getting about 240, 260. I'm not sure how much of this game is actually outdoor segments. And like you can see, there's a lot of stuff going on. It's transitioning rapidly. We are playing this on the Ultra Nightmare preset, though I did turn motion blur off entirely because for whatever reason that's included in Ultra Nightmare. Insane. DLSS is off, though. This is native resolution, 1080p. All of the games I tested were in 1080p, just because it was the easiest availability for me. I have a 1080p monitor that can do 240 Hz. I am editing this on a 4K monitor, but realistically, if you're playing at 4K, you're going to see about a 30 to 40% decrease in your FPS in general. Ray tracing is going to be a lot more intense. But just for the sake of a 1080p card and a comparison for the other cards at a future date. Our next game is Apex Legends, and if I'm going to be honest, I was completely surprised I even had this installed at all. This game looks like garbage. Yet again, all max settings, and it looks like a mobile game unironically. It makes sense because it could play on a PlayStation 4, but it looks like a PS4 game. There's aliasing and a lot of spots. It almost looks fuzzy at times. You get a low resolution. I even had to double check my video settings for a moment to make sure they were on full. But I mean, we're getting pretty good frame rates, 220 in this menu, and if we go back to the gameplay, yeah, 220, 216, 12. we're hovering around that 200 range, and again, for a competitive title, you're likely not playing at the highest settings. You're playing with high textures so you can see people, and high distance. But you're likely turning shadows or reflections and all that off. Sometimes you could get a competitive advantage for reflections, but it's very rare in games like this. It's really just to make it look prettier. Oh, you could see there it dipped down to 176, 169, 165, but this is a very open, very cluttered area. Even so, we are very, very chilling here. I couldn't feel any frame dips at all, even though we are fluctuating rapidly between the 200s and the 160s. There weren't any frame spikes. It was fine. It was an acceptable performance, and for an esports title, that's what you want. Our penultimate game here is Cyberpunk 2077, and I didn't realize this until after my testing, but this was entirely with path tracing on. I turned it on the Ray Tracing Overdrive preset, and I didn't realize that put path tracing on by default. This did use DLSS 4, not 4.5, because for whatever reason Cyberpunk doesn't use that, but it is the original version of DLSS 4, so no later advancements or anything, and it's got motion blur off. And we are still seeing 60 FPS, 64 right here. It's really interesting how it's balanced pretty well between the CPU and GPU. I don't entirely know what the bottleneck here is. We dipped down to 40s for a second there. It could be because the game is installed on a hard drive. It's likely trying to load assets, and that might be the bottleneck here. But I don't know for certain. It's still a more than acceptable frame rate, and I didn't show it in the testing, but I did turn off DLSS afterwards, and we were still getting about the same FPS, a little bit lower, hovering around the 50s, but more than acceptable for a story-based game like Cyberpunk. With just ray tracing on, you'll get even more performance versus path tracing. And for my final test, is this even a surprise at this point? I did the finals, and it should be noted that this was the first thing I tested, and I restarted my computer and changed some BIOS settings after this because some of the games wouldn't launch at all. I did have a manual overclock on, capping my CPU at 5 GHz here, so you can see that the CPU utilization is about 60%. I'm at 5 GHz consistently. 5,000 megahertz, same difference. But the GPU is about 60% utilization. I do have the frame rate capped at 90, and there is a reason for that. I have done extensive testing with the overclock on, and I determined that I can get consistently 90 frames per second in game, partially because of the engine, partially because of the destruction. Typically I play power shift, but this was done in quick cache. Because I feel like most players play quick cache, and it's a lot easier to get a lot of destruction in close quarters combat. We are getting a very we are getting a pretty variable frame time here, but we're still hovering around that like 83 to 90 FPS. When I was playing, I didn't notice any large dips, other than when doing replays and stuff like that. But actually playing, you want a consistent frame time because your aim will feel the most consistent. It was a big issue for me before when I would get dips down to 20 and 30 frames per second before changing to an AIO, because my CPU was just throttling heavy every time. Where my aim just felt very inconsistent. I couldn't consistently flick. Sometimes it would feel really fast, sometimes it would feel really slow. But in general, capping your frame rate is good for a game like this. If you're able to get 60, that's good. If you're able to get more than that, that's great. This is at the absolute maximum settings, maximum ray tracing, no motion blur, of course. The only difference is the capped frame rate. I'm not doing super great here, but I was also mostly focused on my performance stats. The in-game performance stats are actually incredibly useful if you are going to do any overclocking or testing yourself. On the left is just the MSI Afterburner that we've seen with all the other games, but the finals itself will actually give you a detailed performance counter if you turn it on. It doesn't show your CPU utilization, but it shows GPU, but it does show your CPU frame times. And you can see here, my CPU render is hovering between like 7 to 10. My CPU game, about the same, it's going 8 to 9. And if you add those numbers up, if you add your GPU frame time in milliseconds and you add your CPU render time, you typically get your frame time in milliseconds. And it's going to be off a little bit because things are pulling at different rates, but it's extremely helpful for overclocking, for testing, for optimizing your game for the highest frame rate or the highest visual quality at a playable frame rate. Because that's what my aim was. My aim was the highest quality at the most playable frame rate, and I can get about 90 FPS. And even if I turn most of these settings down, I still get around 90 to 100 FPS just because my CPU is the bottleneck here. But in 2026, it is okay to have bottlenecks, and you shouldn't let anyone tell you otherwise. Prices of everything are just insane right now. Graphics card prices are starting to skyrocket because of the RAM shortage. RAM itself has gone up 600-700% in the past few months. I remember I was looking at a kit of 16 gigabytes DDR5 RAM because I was gonna like completely redo my system, and it was, I believe it was $40 US, and I looked at that same kit a few weeks ago and it was over $500 US. That is insane. That is almost unacceptable, but there's not much you can really do about it. So it is perfectly fine to have bottlenecks, and it's better to have a CPU bottleneck than it is a GPU bottleneck, because yes, it is harder to upgrade your CPU. You often have to upgrade your entire motherboard and your RAM, but with graphics cards individually being so expensive, I would argue it's better to have a good graphics card now than it is to have a good CPU now. And of course you want one that can do the things that you want it to be able to do, but you also want to be able to upgrade in the future. So my motherboard works with, I believe, 12th, maybe 11th gen Intel, I don't quite recall. It's a Z690 chipset, so I can do at least 12th gen Intel up to 14th gen. Which I'm not going to do. I'm perfectly happy with my 12700K, and if I was going to upgrade, I would upgrade to the quote-unquote 16th gen, the Core Ultra series, Ultra 2 more specifically. That's the system I was looking at. You can find deals at different retailers for bundles. Like at Micro Center, they have a bundle for AM5 and for what's it called? LGA 1851, I think Intel's calling it, where you can get like a brand new system essentially for about $600 US after tax. But the price for that has been increasing too because RAM is so much harder to find. Even so, it's a steal compared to the normal price of about $1,000 US, which you would pay for the parts individually, especially the RAM. The RAM alone would be $700-800 US. If you are looking for a graphics card to front head you into the future of gaming, computing, AI, whatever, I would highly, highly, highly recommend the 5070 Ti. Now, don't cheap out and go for the 5070. There's a reason for that. Yes, it's $250 cheaper, around $200 cheaper realistically. It's about $550 US for the 5070. Do not do it. It's got about 30% less CUDA cores. It's got 12 gigs of VRAM instead of 16. So you're going to hit a limit if you do a lot of work, or if you have multiple monitors, or you play VR games. You're going to hit a limit at a certain point, especially with games getting more demanding. Though hopefully the current RAM shortage will fix that a little bit, because developers can't just assume that people have the newest hardware because of the extreme price right now. But I highly recommend this card. $750 US is a lot. It's even more if you buy a specific vendor, because ASUS will charge you $1,000 for this card, which is the price of a 5080. No, that is a scam. Do not do it. The absolute maximum that I would spend on a 5070 Ti is $800 US. Do not spend any more than that, or you are getting scammed. Because while yes, this is an incredible graphics card, you also don't want to be paying 5080 prices just because ASUS or Gigabyte says, yes, this is how much we're charging for our card. No, don't do it. From what I've seen, PNY and MSI have the best prices for 5070 Ti's. Now, again, graphics card prices are going up right now, but you can still find them around the 760 to 800 range. They do sell out fast though. So when you see one and you have the funds to get one, I would do it. Yes, you're going to need a power supply that either has 3 8-pin connectors or a 12-volt high power connector, or ideally you have a modular power supply so you can just fix that yourself. But that's really it. If you're bottlenecked by your CPU, that's okay. If you're bottlenecked by your RAM, that's okay. I have slow RAM. I have DDR4 at 3200 megahertz. That is about as slow as you can get for DDR4 anyways, and I can still game just fine. This is an amazing graphics card, and I cannot recommend it enough. If you're getting to AI workloads, really any 50 series card is going to be more than fine. I did buy this card specifically for that reason. And while I can't show any of what I'm doing yet, you're just going to have to trust me, bro, on this one. I get literally a 12 times increase using the 5070 Ti over my 3060. And there are numerous reasons for that. For starters, the 3060 is old. It's got about like a 10th, well, not really a 10th, but probably like a third of the CUDA cores that 5070 Ti has. It's only got 12 gigs of VRAM. However, the bus width is larger on that 3060. But that doesn't matter, because for AI workloads, you're not really transferring data that often, or at least not the ones that I do. It's more the raw compute of the LLM or the vision model or the image generator or whatever you're doing with AI. Any 50 series card will work because it has those newer cores, it has the better processors, they're faster, they're cooler, they're just better. So any 50 card will do. If you want to go on a budget, a 5060 Ti will be more than fine. You'll get 16 gigs of VRAM. For larger models, you can run like Llama, probably GPT-3. So yeah, honestly, pick up this card if you can. It's incredible.